Welcome to the Basic Income Show. I'm your host, Scott Santens, and these are my co-hosts here, Conrad Shaw and Josh Worth. We talk about the latest developments in the world of basic income. It's been 2 weeks since our last show. We try to do this every 2 weeks. So we've got a couple weeks worth of news developments to catch up on. And yeah, to start things off, I'm thinking just want to share with everybody that there's something that everybody can help with who watch the show, and that is the South by Southwest panel picker. Conrad, just want to talk a little bit about what this is going to be?
Yeah. So South by Southwest, for those who don't know, is a pretty big deal in terms of festivals and ways to get news out and connections and stuff like that. So we're looking to both submit Bootstraps, the docu-series, to the film festival side of South by Southwest. And this goes on in Austin, Texas in March every year. So that's sort of a timeline. So it'd be a great place for us to feature the Bootstraps docu-series for film audiences and start showing the work that we're going to be doing. We should have several really quality level episodes by then and hopefully already know where it's going to live, like on what platform and stuff. And then at the same time, there's three parts to the South by Southwest sort of thing. There's the film festival, there's like a radio thing, I think, and then there's the innovation conference. So as part of the innovation conference, we're submitting Commingle for both a presentation and an innovation award. The presentation side of things, which is this that we're sharing now, they have sort of this panel picker thing where the general public votes for what they want to see. And it's one of those things where it's like we have to ask people to go do it because it's sort of a popularity contest. If you go to the thing with the main list, there's like 4,000 applications. No way to read them all. It's really like how many people can you drive to our festival? So do the thing. Go if you want to see us be able to present. Commingle when we should already be up and running to a degree where we've
And
at
it's
least
all
got
three of us too. Like all
right.
three of us will be
That's right.
there.
If you want to see this very show live on
Right.
stage, that's kind of what we're talking about
Well,
here.
and Dea probably too.
Get your tickets. Daya will be there. It's going to be amazing.
So we should have a lot to share. This could be like our big key stepping out in the public discourse and saying, here's our docu-series that's coming out now. This is like stop one of our national impact campaign and tour of screenings. And here's this platform that people can join and be part of a basic income. Like that's kind of what we're looking at South by as a potential place to kick all of this off in 2026. So yeah, as many votes as we can get. Sign up for the thing, share it. It might make you create an account with your email address. They haven't spammed me yet, but if they send you something and you unsubscribe, it won't hurt our feelings. We just need people to go click on that heart and make it turn red. Can you demonstrate, Scott? It looks like you haven't voted for this thing.
I have already voted for it. It's just from a different browser that I'm not logged in on.
I
Well,
think
maybe
that
it'll let you vote
counts.
twice.
Sometimes it does.
Okay. Well, that little heart will turn red once you've succeeded. So yeah, everyone, please help us get into that festival.
And then everybody can say, I knew these guys when they were nobodies. And then they'll get there and they'll be like, they're still nobodies.
All right, so we'll go from that to this, which is just another thing people can do to help. Like it's more in Ireland, but what they just did is they opened up like a consultation thing just to the public. You can see it closes on the 5th of September. It's open right now, and it's just like asking about the Basic for the Arts program, and it asks like, are you a current recipient? Or are you not? Member of the public? Do you think that it should be made permanent or not? And then how people should be selected, for what duration, and the amount, and anything else additional. Like lots of people are saying, even for like the additional part of, yeah, you should do it like fully universal to everybody and make that permanent. But like at least like make the Basic for the Arts scheme permanent. So yeah, if you want to do a little action, then that's something you can do
We don't often
as well.
have like action items for people. I
Right.
think more and more we
Mhm.
might when we have
Yeah,
like
we
cool
should
things to
start
like
doing
connect
that
people
more.
to. But let's get this in the description, these links. Yeah, let's see how we can turn our massive audience into a force for good.
All right. So next up,
So to
let's
set my
see.
expectations, when should I plan on going on my little tangent? Do you have news first, or should I start? It isn't really a tangent if you haven't already started talking about something else, right? It's just a conversation. Okay.
I just want to, get to some of the main things first.
The
Let's
headlines,
do,
hot off the
yeah,
press.
get some headlines in here. Bit of news from another
The city of
pilot.
Palm Springs has a universal basic income pilot program. It's administered in part by DAP Health. This program provides monthly cash payments to a select group of residents.
While the program has experienced some setbacks, residents receiving payments say it's an invaluable support system. NBC Palm Springs contributor from DAP Health, Stephen Henke, has more tonight.
Imagine living on less than $1,000 a month with debt mounting, housing at risk, and no safety net in sight. That was the reality for 14 residents of Palm Springs before they were selected for a bold experiment, a universal basic income pilot program that gave them $800 a month, no strings attached. It was a lifeline and a second chance. But the road to impact wasn't without bumps. Tonight, we look at how DAP Health stepped in to rescue the program, protect its participants, and deliver a powerful proof that guaranteed income can change lives. To understand what went wrong and what went remarkably right, I sat down with CJ Toby, Chief Transformation Officer at DAP Health. He oversaw the program's turnaround after taking full control in July of 2024.
DAP Health, we learned that the administration of the current UBI project was uncertain. And so DAP Health stepped in to make sure that these participants continue to receive their $800 of monthly stipend, but more importantly, the project overall, to show that universal basic income is a proven effective model to help people gain financial sustainability.
But behind the data and decisions are real people, people whose lives shifted because of this monthly support. I spoke with one participant about what $800 a month meant when it was needed.
And when the UBI came along, $800 a month was almost 150% more of what I was making. I'm making about $400, $500 a month and subsisting on that, couch surfing with friends and, things like that, planning where I'm going to be showering next week or things like that. So that UBI money, it meant the world to me.
The final results are in. From housing stability to better mental health, the outcomes suggest more than just financial change. They suggest a pathway to well-being.
If you want to improve someone's psychosocial well-being, get people motivated to go back to school, get a better paying job and reduce stress and fear in someone, look at those results. Providing people financial stability so they can not have the daily stress of carrying that weight around on if they're going to be able to be in the same spot in a week because the first is coming up and they can't afford rent, or how they're going to get food on the table tonight. Those alone is reasons why a UBI program would work and why other cities should look at this.
For DAP Health, the pilot was more than a project. It was a lesson in partnership, accountability, and what it really means to serve the community with integrity.
We learned that partners are not just a mission match alone, that there's a lot of things that we need to do to vet out those partners. Just go through those checks and balances and making sure that regardless of what that risk is, right, that we get proper approvals and make sure that vetting process is solid.
In a time when conversations around poverty, equity, and public spending grow louder, this pilot offers something rare, clear evidence that dignity works, that stability breeds growth, and that when trusted institutions step up like DAP Health did, lives don't just survive, they begin to thrive. The question now is, what could happen if more communities followed suit?
Our thanks.
Yes, what would happen?
Nobody
That's
knows.
like the headline there too. Life-changing results. Hell yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
good job. It's a little weird that the guy that was running it also seemed to be like the newscaster. Like he was in front of the NBC logo as if he was like somebody there as a
You think he was in the
reporter, but
wig
then
too?
well,
And he was like
yeah.
interviewing himself?
No, I don't think so. But it did seem a little, it's another weird aspect of today's bizarre media landscape.
There was something odd about that piece that, like, it kind of felt like a fluff piece, even though it was like saying the things that I know
it
to be
felt
true.
advertorial.
It
Yeah,
felt like
which is
these people are trying
fine.
to convince me about basic income rather than do journalism on the fact that it's worth
Right.
being
Like the
convinced.
journalism, the TV station was like, so we're going to do a report on the thing that you ran. It sounds like it was really good. And so can you give us some details about it? Or better yet, why don't you just come report on it? I'm going to sit here and just roll the tape. Is that okay?
Yeah. I mean, I wish more people would do that for me. Just like
Yeah.
seed the desk.
hmm
You want to be the anchor? Go for it.
Come on, come here.
All right, so along those same lines, just another one is LA City Council has advanced a program, and so they just voted unanimously to allocate $2 million for a new program that would provide $1,000 per month for 2 years to survivors of intimate partner violence and transitional aged youth, so those coming out of foster care between the ages of 16 and 24. That's always nice to see. You know, I'm happy to see like these programs continue to like get actual like public funding, and I don't know, it just seems like a
Yeah.
lot of it's happening in California.
I mean, these are the ones that we find there are certain demographics for targeted pilots that are always an easy win. Like it's like low
Yeah.
hanging fruit. Like no one's gonna ever have a problem with foster youth, like aging out of the system, getting a little help, right? So it's just like when those land, and our friend, I'm kind of proud of our friend Giselle for kind of getting that sort of having a big part in getting that started. Is like, first of all, it just shows great positive outcomes. And second of all, there's not a single politician or organization anywhere who's going to like balk at, like, oh no, we're like showing favoritism towards orphans, like,
It's hard to do.
you know,
I wouldn't put
even,
it past some
even,
people, but
even,
it's hard to do.
even like okay, so this is a good segue into a short bit of one of my tangents, which is about spinelessness and organizations and or just like fear, where I'm coming off some frustration of like some org that was gonna support us and do a thing with us backing out at the last second because they're worried about the administration. And like they're telling me about how like, oh, we even took the word climate off of our website, like not even climate change, like the word climate, the idea that anything could make them a target, like they had another program that
Yeah.
had the word inclusion in it, not used in the context of DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, but they were just talking about like economic inclusion, but they like struck that word from their website. And it's just, and we're even going with like a non-political free market approach to testing this out and getting data. And they're like, we're worried that, all of our funding is going to get shut down or we're going to get targeted. So there's a lot of tail tucking, right? So this kind of ties back into the activating audiences and regular people is more and more the history of this project. And I think the future of this project relies on individuals who aren't like beholden to like authorities or whatever to decide to make it happen, like to put their energies behind this. Like it was always individual donors, not orgs and things, because everyone's afraid of anything that makes them seem like they're standing for something.
Yeah, it's like we're seeing institutional erosion. We're seeing institutions just like fold out of concern for potential retribution. So really, we're entering an environment where mutual aid is something that's going to be increasingly necessary. So fortunately, commingle is a tool that can actually help with that during that time to some degree.
And it's really funny to me, like the cognitive dissonance there of like the person I'm talking to being someone, and this is just one of many examples of this. I don't want to make anyone individually feel bad, but they're so used to this sort of top down, like we have this big, powerful organization, like this thinking that their way of doing things, like big philanthropy, big whatever, is the only way, really. They don't buy into the potential of mutual aid and solidarity because they don't like really respect the power of the common man and people coming together at the same time as saying, but also we can't do anything because our hands are tied because like someone might be upset if we use the wrong word. But also we're the only ones who could possibly do anything, but we can't do anything. Maybe come back in 4 years, right? And it's like, so we have to prove them wrong. Like there was also like a statement there, like if you can scale this and show that it's profitable and makes revenue and sustainable, we'd love to support. And it's like when we don't need you, it's So this is going to continue to be a grassroots endeavor. Like we got to get just regular people to help make this happen.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it just seems increasingly the case that the only thing that's actually going to change things for the better is grassroots activity. There's
Us,
no, yeah, there's
all
no
of us.
like institution coming to the rescue. It has to be us. As Andrew Yang would say, like during his campaign, I always liked it when he said that. It'd be like who's the cavalry, and it's us. Like you can't expect someone else to come in and save the day. And a good example is the New York Times, like recently. Like with what we covered last week, was just like how bad that institution is failing. Same with Washington Post. In response to like the DC takeover, and it's like, what are you guys doing? Like, how are you like a major institution, and you're just like, well, we don't want to
They're
risk
the ones
anything.
that are the most dangerous because they're the ones we have given our trust to, right? Like if some, shock jock on right-wing media comes on and says some awful things, we at least know that this is a shock jock on right-wing media and we can take it with a grain of salt and be like, I wonder if that claim had any truth to it. I'm going to look that up or something like that. If it comes out of the New York Times, all of a sudden everyone and their sisters is like sending me the article, be like, oh no, it looks like UBI doesn't work. Like it's just an assumed credibility and reputation. And we can't forget that the New York Times is sort of a paid advertiser for some of the greatest ills we face. Like they are an accomplice to completely, fronting the fossil fuel industry narratives about climate change. And like they have a lot of blood on their hands and they use their platform of respectability to great detriment.
Yeah, I hate to being in the position where like I don't like how we've lost faith and trust in institutions, but they don't deserve it. Like they just keep doing horrible things. So like I think it's a problem is that because like when they do publish something that's important, and then it's like, well, we don't trust you. It's just we're in a really bad place where there's just so much lost trust in these important things.
And this is one of the really important arguments for UBI that people don't often think about is rebuilding trust in institutions. Because if the institution is delivering impactful individual freedom and empowerment and safety, then we start to find that trust in institutions coming back. In the pilots that are run by governments,
Right.
one of the things they measure is increased trust in government, right? Like in Finland and in other places, you got to
Yeah,
earn that
Alaska.
trust, right?
Yeah.
So this is one way we can start rebuilding our eroding institutions. Yeah. And so we shouldn't be running. The institutions shouldn't be running from UBI. They should be running toward it as their trust in them and their sustainability starts to crumble. Like that's the direction they need to be going, but they're not going to until we kind of force them to.
Since we're talking about the New York Times stuff, this article, something I happened upon after our last show, which it's interesting how it's just kind of more evidence like against making the conclusions that the New York Times did in their piece. To hear the headline, Bright Children from Low-Income Homes Lose Cognitive Edge in Early Secondary School. An analysis of Millennium Cohort Study data from the UK found that the cognitive skills of bright 5-year-olds from poorer families keep pace with those of their wealthier peers until the end of primary school. After the transition to secondary school, however, high-achieving children from low-income families tend to experience a particularly sharp decline in attitudes towards school, behavior, mental health, and academic achievement. This decline occurs between the ages of 11 and 14. So remember, what this study was looking at was kids at age 4 and showing that there was no difference between the treatment group and the control group at age 4, only looking at brain waves, really. But here, like it's showing that, oh, look, like if you have, kids who are, high cognitive kids in poor families, and then comparing to like wealthier families, then like you don't see that difference until after age 4. Like you don't see it till like 11 to 14 is when you like start seeing these differences. And so we were talking about that during the show, talking about like how even if like COVID and stuff and inflation didn't have any impact on this, which we think it did, it still just doesn't make sense to be looking at just age 4 and going, oh, this has no impact on kids, like in general throughout their entire lives. It's just further another example of how bad it is to make that conclusion.
I saw a funny comment. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was like drawing a parallel between like how ridiculous it would be to like if they had studied the effects on brain waves of ending slavery. Like, oh, ending slavery is not working because these 4-year-olds
Right.
aren't like scoring higher linguistically.
I was thinking today of an analogy of like how it'd be funny if like, so testing lifeboats to see if they worked. You know, like, should we actually build lifeboats and should we actually put lifeboats on like ships like the Titanic and stuff, whatever. And so you go out with your lifeboat and you test it like in a super typhoon, you know, and it's like it sinks in the super typhoon. So then you're like, well, I guess lifeboats don't work. So we're gonna have to figure something else out to put, you know, on all these ships and stuff because clearly they don't help anyone from drowning. It's like, well,
Swimming
what are you
lessons.
talking about?
These people need swimming lessons. That's what it is.
So
They
yeah,
need
like
to be
COVID was
taught
like a
in-
super
They
typhoon.
need to learn lifeboat literacy. They need to like make sure that they're getting the proper training.
They should have thought better before they took a ship across the ocean. They should have known.
Yeah, they really should have. Okay, so the next thing is some news out of Malaysia. And there's like an op-ed that was published about this that I thought that it took a good take on it too. It says Malaysia's bold wealth reform pilot could lead to first universal basic income in the world. It's by Professor Jeffrey Williams. And so what this news is that Malaysia is going to do a one-off cash payment to every adult citizen. And again, like we're not the only ones to have done this. It's nice to see these kind of universal payments happen more and more. But like Malaysia, this could be a place too where UBI spreads in popularity even because of something like this. See here, like here's a quote. It has all the features of universal basic income. It's cash transfer to individuals, not households, without any conditions, and available universally without the need to apply. So yeah, good luck to you all in Malaysia. We'll see what happens there even as a result of this.
This is one of those. I was hoping this constant race of like, I imagine the horses that you're spraying and they're going at the carnival, like the little race, like which country's going to win. And it's like, sometimes it's India and sometimes it's South Korea and now it's Malaysia.
Yeah.
And like, we're trying, like we're shooting as hard as we can towards that little USA horse, but one of them's got to get to that finish line at some point. Jesus.
Yeah.
Feels like we're getting close though. It's like getting exciting, you know?
Yeah, it's really nice to see universality be picked up more and more, even if only for one-offs. And I don't know, along those lines too, this is some news out of Colombia. And so on this one, just a quick intro here, a bill was recently introduced in Colombia for basic income, and they shared with me an English version of the bill. So I got like a direct translation of the bill from the people who wrote it. And then what I did is I just fed that into Notebook LM, and they have a new option there. Like we've listened before to the podcasters talk, but this is like a newer thing too, where you can do like a video presentation. So just wanted to go through here so people can learn even what the bill's all about.
Welcome to The Explainer. What if a government decided to give its poorest citizens a regular income with absolutely no strings attached? Today, we're diving into a really bold proposal from Colombia that aimed to do exactly that. It's one of those massive what-if questions, right? It has huge implications. But in Colombia, this wasn't just some academic thought experiment. It was a real policy put right on the table. That's right. Lawmakers actually drafted a bill to establish what's called a Universal Basic Income, or UBI. So let's unpack it. How would it actually work, and what are the big ideas driving it? Okay, so here's our roadmap. We'll start with the core concept, then get into the nitty-gritty mechanics. We'll cover the official justification for it, look at the global examples that inspired them, and finally, we'll tackle the big one: how to pay for it all. All right, first up, what was this bill really trying to accomplish at its heart? Now, this is really key. This wasn't framed as just another welfare program. The bill presents it as a new right, an unconditional payment designed to give people a solid floor to stand on. So the goal isn't just to help out, it's to fundamentally try to eradicate poverty and to do it with dignity. Okay, so that's the big vision. But how would it all work in practice? Let's get into the nuts and bolts. So when you hear universal basic income, the first question that probably pops into your head is, does universal really mean everybody, or is it more targeted? Well, the plan was
It does
to
mean
start with
universal.
how its own official registry identifies as living in extreme or moderate poverty. So while the long-term vision might be universal, the initial rollout was going to be laser-focused on those who need it most. And the scale here is just staggering. We're talking about nearly 9.5 million households. This would be, without a doubt, one of the biggest, most ambitious social programs in Colombia's entire history. Crucially, they wouldn't just flip a switch and turn it on overnight. The plan was to phase it in. Payments would start at half the monthly minimum wage in the first year, and then gradually ramp up over 5 years until they hit the full amount. This approach makes the whole thing a lot more manageable, both for the economy and for the logistics of getting it done. The bill also lays out some really vital rules for how it would all run. A specific government department would handle it. Payments would be electronic, sent by direct transfer. The money would be protected so creditors couldn't seize it, and it would be exempt from certain taxes. And here's a fascinating detail. In households with women, the payment goes directly to them. That was a very deliberate choice aimed at empowering women as the key managers of household resources. So we've got the how. We get the mechanics. But what about the why? What's the philosophy that's driving such a huge, almost radical idea? Let's get into it.
This quote from the bill's justification really gets to the heart of it. The people who support this see UBI not as a handout, but as the fulfillment of a fundamental right. And that's a profound shift in thinking, right? It's moving from viewing poverty as a kind of personal failing to seeing a basic standard of living as something a just society actually owes its citizens.
And its supporters argue that the positive impacts go way beyond just the bank account. Their core belief is that unconditional cash empowers people to make their own best choices. That autonomy, they claim, creates this incredible ripple effect, leading to better health, better educational outcomes, stronger communities, and even helping with huge national goals like peace building and environmental conservation. Of course, an idea this big doesn't just materialize out of thin air. The folks who wrote this proposal looked all around the globe at other cash transfer programs for inspiration and for lessons learned. Yeah, they definitely did their homework. They pointed to several key international case studies. Brazil's long history with the stuff was a major influence for sure. But they also drew lessons from programs in the US, a big research pilot in Kenya, and even the unique dividend model they have up in Alaska. The story in Brazil is especially telling because it shows this isn't an overnight thing. It was a journey that took decades. It started with a bill way back in 1991. Then in the mid-90s, you saw individual cities start their own little programs. All of that experience eventually led to the giant Bolsa Familia program in 2003. They even launched a green version later to promote conservation. And by 2023, the program was reaching over 20 million families. The lesson here is that transformative change often starts small and builds over time.
And the other examples they looked at show just how different these programs can be. You've got the Alaska Permanent Fund, which is a true universal dividend paid to every single resident from oil money. It shows these things can be politically popular for the long haul. And then you have something totally different, like the Give Directly pilot in Kenya. That was a rigorous scientific study that proved giving cash directly can have measurable positive effects on a community's economy and health. So one shows political staying power, the other shows scientific proof.
All right, let's tackle the giant elephant in the room. A program this big sounds incredibly expensive. So what's the financial plan? How will they pay for it? This really is the make or break question for any UBI proposal. And it's the first one everybody asks. So where does the money actually come from? The primary funding strategy is actually pretty straightforward. It's consolidation. The plan was to replace several existing, sometimes fragmented, cash transfer programs. The idea was to take the roughly 7.3 trillion pesos already budgeted for all of them and channel that money into one single, more efficient and more powerful system. And as you can see, that initial chunk of funding comes almost entirely from just redirecting existing budgets. The two biggest programs, Citizens Income and Colombia Mayor, make up nearly 3/4 of the money that would be repurposed for this new UBI. But consolidation is just the starting point. To make sure the program could last, the bill identifies a whole range of other potential funding streams. They were looking at everything from the general national budget and profits from state-owned companies to money from natural resources, international cooperation, and even co-financing from local governments. And that brings us to the final and biggest question. A proposal like this is about so much more than just budgets and logistics. It forces us to ask what we truly owe each other as members of a society. Whether this specific bill in Colombia passes or not, the conversation it started challenges all of us to imagine what a social contract for the 21st century could really look like.
That was actually really good. That was really
Yeah, pretty useful.
really smart. It had a lot of things that I thought it did well. One, the mechanisms of and highlighting that it's just to women, and then like the way that they were setting it up, or not just to women, but like they were specifically making sure it got
Right.
to women in households as opposed to just the head of the household or whatever. It's something we complain about a lot. Yeah, for people commenting that my dog jumped up on my lap. There's thundering here and she's nervous, so I was trying to console her. But that's Pepita, named after a pumpkin seed. But yeah, there was something in there, like the whole Colombia. The other main thing I wanted to talk about was having to do with um, basic income for conservation, for environmental protections, and that was a big part of this video, like the Bolsa Verde. And one of the
The
things I'm excited
Bolsa,
about,
yeah.
I've been getting in conversations recently with people setting up, trying to set a basic income for conservation. There's this group, Cash for Conservation, that is, I'm hoping, going to lead to something. But we'll be having some meetings down in Brazil at the BN conference in August, and some people I just got a call this morning where people are excited to meet each other and start talking about working together. And so there's people are really concerned about Amazon rainforest protection and conservation that I've been trying to tell for years. You got to get money to the people that live there rather than just like whatever these top down things that they're funding are. And they're starting to listen, and they're just starting to take these meetings and recommendations I'm giving. And there is an increasing amount of evidence that like the effects on essentially human behaviors of giving people enough resiliency to like make uh, better choices to steward their lands and their resources is really effective. It's really powerful to just empower the locals.
One thing I wanted to add too, just wanted to make sure that people knew as well about the Colombia bill, is that so it's proposing that the money only go to those in poverty and like near poverty. So it's not universal, but then like the language of the bill actually talked about like the importance of universality and stuff. So it's almost like you can tell that the legislators are just doing this as like to start off with, and then hopefully they can grow it to universal by even like having the importance of universality in the language. But I just want to make sure people know too that even if this were to pass, it would not be true to say that Colombia has a universal basic income. That they wouldn't be the first with a universal basic income because they're just calling it universal basic income, but it wouldn't be. So it's like I like that a country is putting a bill forward that they're calling universal basic income, but it isn't, too. So like, but
And
they're hoping for it to be a
that can
start.
be a mixed bag. Does it get
Right.
traction for the idea, or does it get the idea dismissed? Like, because if it's not a actual universal basic income, we shouldn't expect it to have the same outcomes. But if like whatever its outcomes are get tied to the idea of basic income, then that can be troublesome too.
So if in Colombia they were funding it using tax dollars, right? And the amount of the tax was directly attributable to the amount of the UBI. Like, so they're factoring that UBI into the tax payment. Like, does that still count in your mind?
I'm not sure what are you saying that it's kind of more like
Could you hear
a
me?
negative income tax?
Yeah, if it was treated as a negative income tax, does that still, like, because you could kind of say in a proposal that this isn't going to everybody because it's not, right? Like the cash is not directly going to somebody if the payment and the taxes are being like combined into one.
Yeah, and I don't want to confuse things by saying that like it is a universal basic income. So like, I am kind of iffy on the fact that they're putting forward a bill calling it universal basic income, but isn't. But at least in the bill, it's saying that no, this is a universal right. It should be universal. They want to like go towards universality. And so if you see it towards like a step towards universality, then I think it's okay to call this a basic income bill, even though also like Conrad said, that could be confusing. And, especially if there's some kind of impacts that people don't like and they say, oh, universal basic is bad. And you have to explain, well, it's not. So yeah, it's like, I don't know when it comes to like exactly what should be done, if it's helpful or not. I don't know yet.
And generally, if something else gets conflated with UBI, it's sort of waters down the potential positive sort of understanding of UBI, because it's hard to imagine something kind of working as efficiently or as well as UBI. Like when people conflate pandemic unemployment benefits with UBI, that's a big problem, because then they say, see what happened, and nobody wanted to work, and because we were paying people not to work. And a lot of people are like, what people are missing is that wasn't UBI. That was paying people not to work. It's very, very, very different. Like in order to get your unemployment benefits, you have to not be working. So you're paying people not to work. Whereas UBI is more like the stimulus checks, where you just got it if you were around, and if you worked, So like the confusion in the idea and the terminology long term is something we've been battling, and is something that makes it harder and harder to imagine getting a good UBI through if like we can't get consensus around what the idea even is, and why that specific idea has a different level of potential than the other ideas it gets confused with.
Yeah. Okay. So the next thing I want to share, and this is, I think this is a really fun one. I'm looking forward to this. Again, trying something new. It was brought to my attention recently that like a Japanese light novel that actually is an anime series too, called High School Prodigies Have It Easy, Even in Another World, had a scene in that was pro UBI. It's like the main character is considered to be the world's greatest politician, and he like has this author filibuster about basic income. And so this scene isn't available yet in the actual series. I looked into this and saw that the series itself has only covered like the first 3 volumes, and then like this is in volume 9. So it'll like be a while, if ever, if this like actually comes out as an anime adapted scene. But I thought it'd be fun to use AI voices to like play out this scene, because I thought like the text of it was really good. The author is Riku Misora, and clearly the author is very pro UBI, and I thought they did a great job talking about UBI in this scene. So I put together a thing.
2 things before we start. One is,
Sure.
as an actor, I'm slightly offended you didn't ask me to play one of the parts, and I'm going to have to listen to AI do an okay job. And 2, we should maybe define the term author filibuster for people. What do you mean by that?
The author filibuster is like just a trope. And so it's a trope in various shows, or, especially like animes, but, shows in general, where the author clearly kind of interjects something into a scene. Inserts it in a way that, it seems kind of out of place. Like you didn't need to do that. It's not super tied to the plot, but you can tell the author just really wanted to talk about this. So this is an example of that, where clearly the author wanted to talk about how awesome universal basic income is, and wanted to have the world's greatest politician talking about it. So that's what it is.
All right, let's sit through a filibuster.
His tracks and posed his question. Masato gave him a theatrical nod.
You'd be giving people an entitlement that assures them they can survive without working. You're removing the necessity for labor.
The question was, what happened when you took away the need for people to work? The way Masato put it, their desire to try would decrease, and the labor participation rate would deteriorate.
The quality of service will go to shit. Then there's the progressive tax you'll need to implement to fund UBI.
I should also just say, too, that Masato apparently is the world's greatest entrepreneur. So this is the conversation between the world's greatest entrepreneur and the world's greatest politician.
And the entrepreneur is against UBI in this one?
Yeah, at the beginning of this.
Interesting.
With the 1-2 combo of lower quality and worse cash flow, our nation's industries are going to stop being competitive in the global marketplace. And you know what'll happen then? Our GDP's going to shrink, and your tax revenue will drop with it. Eventually, you won't even be able to keep funding your UBI. If the government attempted to maintain UBI through lower tax yields, it would have to increase taxation. However, that increase would hurt corporations all over again. It's a vicious circle, and it'll end with our domestic industries in ruins. All those people who supported you will change their tunes. Con man, they'll call you. You'll just say whatever gets you elected.
That's a pretty bold conclusion.
Yeah, well, it's true. That's the way it'll all go down. Look, Tsukasa, as a manager, I've observed a lot of people, and I'm talking from experience here. People are fundamentally lazy deep down. Unless something forces them, gives them no choice, they'll drift through life slothfully. Maybe you could call it a biological mechanism. Lions raised in captivity don't hunt, and it's the same deal with people. If the government raises its people like that, they'll stop working altogether and the nation will fall.
Interesting. So, to sum up, Masato, this fatal flaw you see
Is that it goes against human nature. That's the main problem with UBI. Japan's a country that sells tech and buys resources. If our people stop working, our companies will wither, and our economy will tank so badly that we won't even be able to keep the lights on. Without our companies, we won't have a nation. Sure, wealth is getting concentrated, and maybe there isn't that much trickling down. But if someone has a problem with that, all they gotta do is start their own business and use it to climb.
it's true that lazily drifting through life is a biological mechanism, Merchant. And I admit that humans are furnished with that feature. In primeval times, it may well have been the truest expression of our nature. But now things are different. There's something we now have that animals don't. And its creation changed us on a fundamental level.
What's that?
I'm surprised. I didn't think you'd need to ask. You're the prodigy businessman, aren't you? There's one thing we have that animals don't, and that thing is currency. Its creation increased the range at which goods could be distributed, and the diversity of those goods. It meant that distant civilizations could engage in cultural exchange, and it spurred on human society's rapid growth. However, it also created the ability to use currency to pervert society, hoarding.
Tsukasa pointed out that currency didn't degrade over time, and that gave people the ability to easily store value.
Its presence altered our very natures from creatures that live for the moment to creatures that live for tomorrow. I might need this someday, so I'll save it. I might need this someday, so I'll gather up more of it. We began seeking value for use in the future, even though we couldn't know for sure whether we'd be able to use it. And it turns out that behavior has no limits. The mere existence of value that you can store without it ever spoiling takes those bounds and destroys them. It stops being about having enough for tomorrow or the day after. It becomes about the next year, or the next decade, or the next generation, or the next 3 generations. People gather up more and more and strive for greater wealth than they could ever possibly use. They keep on hoarding it, but no matter how much they hold, it's never enough. The future is infinite after all. So the question is, what happens then? Naturally, some people will be really good at making money, which eventually leads to colossal wealth inequality. There are people who don't have enough to feed themselves tomorrow, coexisting with those carrying fortunes substantial enough to do as they like for generations and never fear going broke. Our homeland exists at the end point of that history, where we have people starving to death while dumpsters overflow with food.
So you're saying that what drives humankind
Is greed. It drives people in our world of extreme wealth inequality, and it motivates the citizens of this world that recently had a revolution. Greed motivates citizens to seek better futures for themselves. By doing so, they change society. You've stood by Rue's side and seen how powerful that drive is yourself.
Rue was a slave girl who, spurred by a desire to buy back her lost family, put her life on the line to convince Masato of her hunger. There was a value to the avarice burning in her young eyes, and Masato recognized that better than anyone. Masato had no way to refute Tsukasa's assertion. He sank into awed silence. Meanwhile, Tsukasa strode onward with intensity in his steps.
With that fact in mind, I not only refute your theory that people are inherently slothful, but I can also state that your fears about UBI destroying the framework of our society are baseless. No matter how the system changes, there's no end to humanity's appetite. We can never go back to being wild beasts. With UBI, I intend to take our countless welfare systems, the ones that have purposely been needlessly subdivided to create power structures, and unify them to break down the barriers, keeping wealth stagnant, and create a vast financial canal that flows back and forth between our nation and its people. It will set countless things in motion. And the first thing it will do is change our relationship with work. The fact that UBI gives people enough to live off of means that workers will possess a lifeline to escape from abusive workplaces. Companies won't be able to exploit laborers anymore. That will lead to moral working environments, which in turn will have a direct impact on employee motivation. A lot of people have big dreams for the future, but are tied down by simply having to survive. And this will give them an opportunity to embrace new challenges. They can start businesses, go into research, create works of art. The world will be their oyster. As you said, Merchant, Japan is a nation with few resources that gets by selling technology. This will allow more people to embrace their potential, which will serve our national interests. On top of that, the flow of goods will shift as well. When the massive waterway that is UBI sends wealth flowing to the masses, tons of goods produced only to be sent to dumpsters will end up in the hands of people who need them instead. The interplay between supply and demand shall become more efficient than ever, and the scale of our nation's markets will expand dramatically. It will fundamentally change the way money operates in the long run. Once people know that there's a baseline income level they'll always have access to, they'll stop thinking of money as something to be hoarded. It will become something to be spent, or perhaps invested. Of the estimated 2 quadrillion yen the Japanese public owns in personal assets, nearly 60% is held in bank deposits. That number is almost unreasonably conservative by international standards, and if we can get that asset ratio more active, it's impossible to estimate how much good it will do for our economy. People, goods, money, the massive UBI river will carry them through our nation with hitherto unseen mobility. That will allow us to systematically build a country where nobody starves again. We'll be trailblazers for a new era and a guiding light for democracies heading into the 22nd century. That's something I feel deeply confident about.
Tsukasa's stance on human nature differed from Masato's, and after laying it bare, he made his stand. Tsukasa stood before Masato's proffered hand, but rather than spare a glance at it, he looked his old friend straight in the eye. His gaze declared that UBI would work. You seriously think you're going to be able to pull that off? You're not talking about changing Japan anymore. You're talking about changing the whole damn world.
I do. People's greed has altered the world before. If people want it, I'll get it done. After all, that's what politicians are for.
I wish that's what politicians did.
One of my immediate thoughts at one point was echoed by someone, Daniel, in the chat. He said, it's rather fear that drives humans insane than greed. And that was something in that piece, and maybe it's partially in translation, but he said greed drives us, or basically pointing to how greed has caused all these problems. And my main point is that greed is a second order sort of human behavior, and before greed comes fear. Your greed comes out of the fear of unsafety and security. And
Right,
that's
the
how
hoarding. The
that's
hoarding
how it
comes
manifests
from,
itself.
fear.
You're greedy because you don't want to be at that state of destitution or zero or lack of respect or whatever it is. You're greedy because you lack.
Yeah, hoarding is a good word. Like you see that same hoarding behavior with like on the hoarder shows where people are just like amassing stuff around themselves to make themselves feel safer.
Right, and they'll even like these hoarders, they'll say that. They'll be like,
right,
I don't know, maybe I'll need this. Like maybe everything will go down, and like I don't know what I'm going to need, so I just keep everything.
Yeah. And the premise of UBI, one of them is changing our fundamental driving motivators in society from fear to joy, and like taking us out of that, how do I live for the future, save up enough, all of that to be safe, to how do I live in the moment and see how much I can get done in the day-to-day, how much I can experience, how much I can matter.
So are you saying that character was not the greatest politician ever?
I think he's missing a few points. I think you'll need to unlock your iPhone. Hold on. I think he missed a few important points, but it seems like in his context where
I think
author is God of all things, then he's a pretty successful
I'll say that, it's not necessarily that the author doesn't get this, but I do think that he was speaking to the world's greatest entrepreneur who like believes in like, greed is good. And he was saying that basically you can still believe that and believe in UBI. And so it's like people's greed will actually drive them to, do more, accumulate more, but actually it's actually good for business. And I don't know, it was like a good like pro-capitalist argument for basic income. And it was that because it was a conversation between these two guys who are friends, but he was basically using a pro-capitalist, pro-greed argument. Like when he talked about the slave girl Rue, like I only watched the first episode to get a little bit more context of this show. And so this slave girl, she's a little girl, and she's freed from slavery by this world's greatest, businessman. And he does it because he can tell that she's super greedy. She's in poverty and she's a slave, but she like wants to like accumulate, like she wants money. She loves money. She wants to accumulate as much as she can. So the argument that Sukasa, the world's greatest politician, was saying was she is not going to be lazy. She is greedy, but she is never going to stop trying to get money just because she has some money, And so I thought that was smart. That kind of was built off that argument.
I couldn't stop wishing. One, I had a lot of acting notes. Two, I couldn't stop wishing that the guy Sukasa was arguing with's name was
Don't
Mikasa.
even say it. Don't.
That would have been perfect. Like the greedy entrepreneur is Mikasa and the UBI guy is Sukasa. Yeah.
And like, it's the same kind of thing where I'm sure if I would have spent more time like doing like the directorial like notes, to make the way things are said sound exactly how like I would say it, that'll come out better. I could have made it better too by like using the actual voices from the show to represent those voices, and that would have been better. But
or you
like
could just wait for them to actually create the show and have that episode appear. But yeah, they probably would edit out most of that. I would guess.
I don't know. I'm really curious to see like if that makes it into the show. If it would have to be.
I would
another
not say it makes for
6 seasons
compelling viewing. But as far as reading goes, it's pretty good. Although some of those shows, like I've seen like
angles.
some very bizarre scenes get played out, like in the few like animes that I've watched. Like there's some strange stuff. So maybe it fits right in.
Yeah, it could. But I love to like seeing this make its way into fiction in a good way. Like I've seen it come into fiction in like weird dystopian ways, unfortunately. Like why are you doing this as a dystopian thing? What are you doing? So to see this like, try to shift the culture through stories like this. This is light novels are like young adult fiction. So, the more that you have this fiction going towards younger kids, younger adults, and they help them like understand UBI better, they'll grow up to understand UBI better. So I'm happy to see this stuff. I think it's exciting.
It's kind of exciting too, especially for a kid. Like I remember reading Ender's Game and it's like,
yeah,
I'm a genius and I'm going to space camp and I'm battling aliens but I have all these big responsibilities and it's also like a subtle nod to like you are the future. Like get excited. And there'll be a disillusionment along the way when all the kids are like, oh, it's going to take like a lifetime of work to do a modicum of good in reality. But
yeah. A funny part of this anime too is they're all in high school. It's like 7 of them, and they're all like the best in the world at what they do. So yeah, it's unrealistic entirely. Also, it's the genre of anime where it takes place in another world, where like characters are transported to another world.
So they're actually in a simulation while they're talking.
They were in like a plane crash, kind of like a Lost situation, but instead of like crashing onto an island, they crashed into like this other like fantasy world where like magic exists, and it's kind of
like Narnia sort of
right
thing.
Yeah, kind of that. It's like they're in like a Narnia world now kind of thing. So there's no like technology and that kind of thing. So like they basically have superpowers even in this world of magic, just because they're like really good at these various things.
Because you have to have superpowers too, so just to be a good manga.
Were they the 7 best at what they do in our world, or are they the 7 best in Narnia because there's only like 20 people in Narnia?
No, they were already the best. They were already best on Earth in high school, the high school prodigies.
It's fun to think of Idiocracy as sort of part of this isekai tradition, right? You get transported to another world.
Right, and you're like the smartest. In a way, he was transported to another world, yeah. So moving on.
Actually, before we go on, I had a thought that the Conrad's description of like the little horses moving along to show like which country is furthest along in achieving UBI, like give you an idea. It's like it'd actually be a cool like data visualization to actually like compile the sort of data that we know about what's happening in each country and
to
their
do like
movement
some
towards
odds,
and like do a little like turn it into a game.
do some
Maybe
friendly
that could
betting.
be on the like a little feature on It's a Foundation's page or on UBI data or something where we just like update it every now and then with who's winning. It's just like have all the countries.
Because I mean, I
raised.
think probably like we've got as good a source as anybody, or Scott probably does, compiling like the data to show like the amount of news stories that have come up for each country, or the amount of like the number of
it'd be
bills that have been put on the table, like, and then maybe even a state by state one. That'd be kind of cool to just like see like which state has got the most action and do like
yeah.
little,
I mean, I wouldn't feel comfortable. Like, it's so hard to figure out like odds. I think it's really up to
well, not
wisdom of the
odds, but
crowd
like
kind of
just to
thing.
maybe like show how much progress each place has
It can
made.
just be your estimate,
Yeah,
and
just
then
make
there's
it
always
yours,
room
like,
if it hasn't
wherever,
reached the
whatever
finish
you
line
think. You
for
could
like
be like
you
the
know
judge.
Liechtenstein to like shoot into the front because they got sprayed
I
with a
could
big water hose.
select like a top 10, and then people could like bet or something based on
Right.
those top 10, and we could see like who has the highest odds of those, something like that.
Yeah, a little fantasy
No, it's kind of
football
fun.
of UBI.
I'm always going to bet on the USA because that's where we're going to make it happen.
I'm betting California. I really am. I think so.
As far as states go, it's certainly a possibility.
Yeah, I was only thinking nation level.
All right, so this is in the UK, and he's the most likely to be the next leader of the Green Party, Zach Polanski. He's actually very pro UBI, and so part of this he's just pitching that there should be basic income for farmers, and it's that's one of those things where, especially in the UK, it can piss people off, but also it can make sense, like it's something that conservatives can get behind. Like already, like here in the US, like you could say that basically Trump is already giving basic income to farmers, like they already have so many subsidies and everything. And so in the UK, he tweeted recently, it's time for basic income for farmers. 20% of the wealthiest landowners receive 80% of the subsidies. Meanwhile, the farmers who protect our food security are often just trying to survive. And he did this interview for the Financial Times. So he's pushing for £1,000 a month to some 100,000 farmers. And so in the UK, people are pissed off at the farmers, because there was, when it came to Brexit, a lot of those like rural farmers, voted for Brexit, and now they're having a hard time. So then people are saying, well, like, why should we start with basic income for farmers when like they voted to be having a hard time? And why should they be the first to benefit? So I don't know. It's interesting to see that conversation take place. Again, like I don't know if it's going to work out to be better to start with farmers or not. I already see a lot of people saying that it should be universal and they should just go universal. But yeah, it's just interesting to see happen.
Yeah. It's this is just another touch point that's making me think it's finally time in the basic income movement to be clear, or maybe shift our understanding of the definitions too. Because for a long time, UBI and basic income were used as interchangeable. But now that there's so many targeted basic income programs, like maybe there is a point to having basic income as direct cash, unconditional to some number of people, can be targeted. And universal basic income is when you do the universal version of it. Because we've been trying to force the issue that basic income means universal, but obviously it's kind of gone in another direction. So do we just kind of use the fact that we're really pushing for the U and like make that distinction, I
don't know. I mean, that's getting into really academic stuff. The definition of basic income is defined by the Basic Income Earth Network as universal and unconditional. The actual definition, it's a periodic cash payment unconditionally delivered to all on an individual basis without means, test, or work requirement. And just because people are using it in like a different way, I don't know. It's like I don't want to start doing that. I just want to help like emphasize the difference. Saying guaranteed basic income, like there's a difference between UBI and GBI. If you put guaranteed in the word, then it can mean universal, but for the most part, it means
and
targeted.
It used to mean universal. I mean, that's the thing is like,
it didn't always.
If we hope to only imply universality without saying the word, I think that's maybe hoping too much.
Saying UBI implies universality. Saying universal or unconditional implies universality. And then basic income, sure, it's confusing for people, in which case I don't like use it for the most part, like to Instead, I always add like the U to help with that. But I don't want to start like using basic income as if it's targeted. Like if
Yeah.
it's targeted, I'll just say guaranteed basic income or guaranteed
I
income.
guess
That's
maybe at
targeted.
least an intermediate step before we lobby to BN to become UBN is like just being careful in general not to assume that everyone assumes that basic income means universal, because that's not the assumption that's floating around out there right now. So we got to be careful to specify UBI.
Yeah, I would say that, and this is how basically I'm behaving at this point too, is just, I don't know, just don't use only basic income. If you want to imply universality, say universal or unconditional or UBI. And if you don't, and if you're talking about phasing, then do guaranteed. But I don't know, just don't use the word, just only the words basic income. And I don't know, like people aren't even using like the hashtag basic income, So I think it's become, it's purely academic. It's become less useful to refer to basic income as only basic income.
Yeah. In fact, I don't even like to say guaranteed basic income or basic income for targeted pilots. I call them like direct cash programs, like targeted direct cash programs. Like I try not to even, introduce the words basic and income to those conversations, or at least not be the one who's introducing that terminology.
I had a conversation recently on Blue Sky where they really liked using unconditional. So again, I prefer that too. I use universal a lot just because of like SEO reasons. Like if you write out universal basic income, then if that's like in the description of a video or it's in an article or something, people are going to be more likely to find that and read it than if you were to say unconditional basic income and not use the word universal.
Right.
But I do like communicating it via unconditional because I just think that's the most important part. Like it needs to be unconditional, and you can understand it as universal by being fully unconditional, even if that's not necessarily, like the academic understanding where unconditional means no work requirement and universal means no means testing. But if you just say unconditional basic income, I think people have like a better understanding.
And that's one of the unfortunate realities. People always say like, well, if you called it this, if you called it the American dividend or whatever, which I argued for early on too, it's like, then it would work. And it's misunderstanding the issues of platform and communication and like SEO essentially. It's like, you can't, if you introduce a new term, even if it like has more theoretical sticking power, you have to start from scratch. You have to like start the fucking movement over again. Like maybe we can coax it in the right direction over time, or when we introduce a bill, we can give it a compelling name like the freedom dividend. But people don't understand in general that like people seem to think that if you just name it correctly and give it the right log line, then all of a sudden it's going to go. And it's not about that. It's about amassing. It's an organizing problem. You need to get millions of people behind a thing. So you need the thing to exist and have long-term stability. So you can't go around changing the name and rebranding.
If it's really going to fly these days, it has to be something that's like nonsensical and that people are going to be like, what the hell's that? Like old people are going to be like, why are kids talking about skibbity,
what
right?
The fuck
like, what was that all about?
What the fuck is a commingle? Dad, it's the new thing.
You might need something even more obscure than that.
A
something
universal
more
dating
ridiculous.
app? What?
That's fine.
What are you doing on that website? We're bajiggiting. It's a new thing where we pass our money around.
Yeah.
All right, so here's something that ties directly into universal versus targeted. And this is really interesting to find like an argument like this. This is a newer study. This is kind of from IDEA. Title, Why Corruption Makes Universal Basic Income Better Than Targeted Welfare. Subtitle, New Evidence Shows that in corrupt settings like India, universal basic income outperforms targeted welfare by reducing bribery and reaching the truly poor. So I don't have access to like the whole article, but
thank God.
But in general, this is just saying that, look, you can be for targeted and, theoretically you're reaching the poor and you're not like helping people who don't need it. You're only helping those who need it. But this is another reality of a targeted program, is that because it's targeted, it's going to be easier for those like the middlemen involved doing like the actual targeting to take it for themselves, or to charge people. There's corruption involved, and some people aren't going to get it because they don't grease palms while other people do. Like universality is the way to get through that. You're just getting it. It goes right from the government directly to the people. Their bank accounts, checks, whatever. But there's no middleman. and you make sure it goes to everybody, and then you just tax and you subtract it from those with higher incomes. That's the way to achieve getting it to the people and not getting it to people who like don't need it by virtue of having too much money. If you target it, then one of the things you invite is corruption. All right, another recent thing. This is like another example of like the realities of like a targeted kind of program. And so the headline here, neurodivergent man overwhelmed by job seeker admin comes off weekly support. And so what this story is about is, this guy who's neurodivergent basically just decided that it's just too much trouble. Like, it was just really giving him like mental health issues, it's just too stressful and everything to continue doing this targeted welfare program, like continuing to jump through the hoops. And it was just like, you know what? I'm done with the hoops. I just can't take this. Like, he needs it, but he's just done with it. And again, like that's a reason
common.
for
People
universality. Yeah,
people like, just sign up for the thing. They don't know. Some of the most effective targeted programs reach like half of the people they're supposed to get to. And part of it's because of stigma. Part of it's because they get falsely disqualified. But a big part of it is like it's too much of a pain in the ass. It's like, I don't have time, especially when you're about to get evicted. Like you need programs when you're going through the hardest time of your life. And all of a sudden they give you a ton of incomprehensible work to do. And it's like, I guess I'll just starve, like, cause I don't,
Right.
Also, I have to be in these other 15 places in this amount of time and pick my kid up from school. It's like, I don't have time to sift through your fucking bureaucracy. So I guess you're not going to help me. That's kind of the reality.
Yeah, I sometimes wonder how much of that bureaucracy is there, like on purpose almost, like, or it kind of ends up there because it is beneficial in the end to have it there. You're saying like, because this is harder now, this guy is now one less person that money has to be dispersed to, that can be, kept
and it's
in
his
the hands
fault.
of the administration or wherever it is. Yeah.
Right,
and
you
it's
can
his
put the
fault.
blame
But
on him.
Yeah, you're like, we did it. We said you could have the money.
And say,
It's right
he's
there.
clearly not in need because he's choosing not to do it.
Yeah.
You get that a lot. Like, why don't people just sign up for the welfare programs we have? It's like, so you've never tried
Right.
to. You've never been involved in one, right? Like that's a key indicator when someone says we have welfare programs. It's like, so you've never been on one or tried to be. Like it's
an
like
actual
100%
tactic.
certainty.
So like the things that you don't want people to do, you make them harder. And like that's why like when you're trying to cancel a subscription to some service that you signed up online, like it's really hard to go find how to do that. And it's
like it's the evil twin. It's the evil cousin of learned helplessness. It's taught hopelessness.
Right. But at the same time, like when I was designing like the flow for canceling Comingle, if you would ever want to do that. But my natural tendency was be like, I don't need to worry about this. I won't put that much effort into it. Right. But then I had to stop and think and be like, that is like, why? Like just make life easier. If the whole intent of what we're doing is to make people's lives easier, like why is there this natural inclination to just sort of not do that?
That's one of the most infuriating things too. I remember I'm going to call it a business, Regal movie theaters. I got like their, you pay the monthly to go to as many movies as you want thing. And it was a lot more annoying and Byzantine than the AMC one to begin with, but I don't have AMC where I live now. And so good job, AMC. But when I tried to cancel it because it wasn't a very good program, it took me like 4 days. I was like searching around the website. There was no one I could call. There was nothing to do. I had to like find this email buried in like a Reddit thread somewhere. Like they make it impossible. So you're signed up, you're paying the thing. Like probably the easiest way to get out of the Regal membership would have been to like claim fraud through my credit card. So they stopped sending the payments. Because trying to just say to Regal, like, I want to end my membership, they made it impossible. Like literally impossible. So that made me like just want to like burn down one of their offices or something. It's ridiculous that they would do that to me. And that's kind of one of the things in this world of like capitalistic exploitation that, could use some
it
fixing.
happens in very subtle ways sometimes.
Yeah.
But
it's not serving you, it's trying to take from you.
But yeah, it's a reason that I sometimes question like the use of unemployment data, like just unemployment claims being like the way that we measure unemployment. Just and like because to be on unemployment is a giant pain in the butt, right?
Yeah,
Like and
especially depending on the state.
yeah, and so to like the number of hoops you have to go through to prove that you're like looking for a job, all that is like that is a job, right? To just like stay on unemployment to fill out the forms. And so and I do think like it is made difficult so that you can that's just one less person that you can say isn't unemployed because they just haven't gone through this very difficult process. So now your unemployment numbers have gone down.
Hey, Scott, I found a really interesting thing maybe is worth talking through a little bit. So this thing I put in the chat, this tweet from James Robichaux, and this is a guy who's sort of a UBI advocate, who's one of the ones who's sometimes mad at me because I like refer to tax-funded UBI programs, and he's like, no, we don't raise taxes first, and it's the whole MMT argument. And I don't want to get into that, but like there's something here he's talking about that's really intriguing to me about sort of conceding the argument. And I would love to like look through, he's got like 4 different examples in a row that are really compelling to me, and then I'd love to turn it to a UBI context because it kind of like set off lightning bulbs in my brain. Lightning bulbs, is that a thing?
Sure, I guess we can do that.
I think it's useful to turn this into like a UBI advocacy and discussion. Like, what does it mean, right?
All right, there it is.
So he says, you don't need to read like the quote he's referring to. He just says, yeah, I keep seeing people saying, but there is no crime wave in DC. We're talking about like the crackdown that's going on in DC right now with Trump. He says, which leaves unquestioned the premise that if there were a crime wave, then draconian crackdowns on poor and disabled people would be an appropriate response. Let's just read through the other few real quick, like as people kind of, this sinks in. Now look at his own responses to his own thread.
I don't see anything.
I'll just read over here. He says, there's another one. It's kind of like, but immigrants aren't committing crimes at higher rates than native-born citizens, which suggests that you think that if they were, this draconian treatment of not just all immigrants, but anyone who might look like an immigrant would be justified. It's also like, but critical race theory is not being taught in schools, which suggests that you agree that critical race theory is bad. It's like, but vaccines don't cause autism, which leaves unquestioned the premise that autism is bad, right? Basically, when you argue the data, like, you know, your reason for being concerned isn't actually happening, it validates the fact that we should be concerned about that thing, right?
Yeah.
You're not as inspired by this idea. I know that there's a tie to like some of the, what's the phrase, giving up the baby with the bathwater or something, but like some of the things we concede in argument to say, actually, that's not what we see in the data. I guess with these cherry-picked data point studies we're always talking about, where someone says, well, people didn't work less in this program or whatever, it sort of seeds the point that people should always work as much or more. Like it says, we agree that people should always work as much or more. And some of these data points are like, they don't even say like when
I don't really think that.
when the work dropped, what it dropped from and to. They're like, work went down 2%, but we don't know if it went from 60 hours a week to 58 or 10 to 8, right? And it's just accepting as true the common premise that people should always work at jobs more, and disregarding like, what if they have other things they could be doing with their time? What if they're already working too much, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I just want people to know the actual like truth of things. And so if someone is worried about people working less, that's like a fair thing to have, you know, like it's true that we couldn't do a basic income if like it actually did happen, where if you did a poverty level basic income, everyone refused to work, you know, like that wouldn't be sustainable. We couldn't possibly do that. So it is important to be able to say, look, like even if there are small increases, there's small decreases, they're small, and it's in these certain groups. And look, like it can actually increase in certain groups too, in certain occasions. Like that's all good to know.
Well, that's what I'm saying is the nuance is important. Just having a broad sweep like this measure went up or down says the measure itself is inherently positive or negative without understanding the nuance. Same with like the brainwave study, right? Like you need to bring in the nuance and talk about when up is good and down is bad and vice versa.
Like I think the most important for me, when it comes to like, first of all, I live in DC. So, it is something that if there were a bunch of crime going on and that like crime was like bigger than ever, then I would be experiencing it. I'd be saying, well, like we do need to reduce crime. And, what are the best ways to do that? It certainly isn't to punish poor people. It certainly isn't to like put homeless people into either camps or prison. Like that's horrible. And it's fair to say, look, if we did basic income, that would reduce homelessness, it would reduce crime, and it would even and reduce some drug use. Like that's good to know as well. It's horrible that any solution to like, oh, look at all the people in the streets, let's put them in jail.
Right. So
No.
the way I would take that tweet of his is like, the way to respond is not to just say, but there isn't a crime wave in DC. It's to say, there isn't a crime wave in DC. And if there was, this would still be a terrible way to deal with it. Right. You have to say both,
Yeah. You should. I don't like it is too simple just to say, oh, we shouldn't be bringing in the National Guard because there isn't a ginormous crime wave. Sure, like that is true that we shouldn't be doing that, but yeah, there's more reasoning to provide. Before we go, just one more thing, and this is just, I think it's kind of funny considering what we're doing. This is like Money on the Mind survey, and it turns out that Americans spend nearly 4 hours a day thinking about money. It's the equivalent of a part-time job, and more time than most people spend preparing meals or exercising combined. Nearly half of Americans, 45%, say thinking about money motivates them to take action to reach their long-term goals. And by generation, Gen Z is spending 4.82 hours a day thinking about money. Millennials are 4.73 hours a day. Gen X is 3.74 hours a day. And boomers are 2.5 hours a day, which, I mean, you look at those age demographics and those clearly are correlated with the amount of money that they have.
Also, I think it's important to differentiate, like thinking about money in theory, because I spend like 16 hours a day thinking about money, or thinking about the lack of money.
If you're doing it for a living, then does that count?
The thinking about or stressing about money is like, I think what they're trying to get at and what they really are measuring is like, how much time does money like intrude into your bandwidth, into your mental bandwidth, rather than like planning or envisioning or whatever. It's like, it really is a measurement of fear in this case.
Yeah, I like this study a lot. This is kind of how I think of this whole problem of like, how much are we being annoyed by the fact that we have to worry about money and when we don't really have to. And so, this is
it really feeds into cognitive capacity. We've talked about that before. It's like we're all our brains are being taxed. Like if you're spending 4 hours a day thinking about money, that's 4 hours a day you could be thinking about other things.
Right.
So if we actually did a basic income and reduced it to what, boomers are spending their time on, which is 2.5 hours a day, then that would basically, we would open up 2 hours a day across the entire population that could be thinking about other things,
and
which it's a pretty big deal.
That does bring us back to what you were talking about, Josh. It's like, it's a certain level of first world problem, but like when someone takes my time, like just like if it's like being on hold for a corporation or going through the paperwork or like, that is one of the things in the world that makes me most furious. Like it piques my sense of injustice. Like this is my time on this earth. I want to be living. I don't want to be I don't want to be wasting it on this work. I don't want to be wasting my brain space on this work. It's like I'm dead during these hours that you've taken from me and I'll never get them back. And I'm so fucking mad about that,
Yes. No, I think I'm trying to think of some good ways to discuss the whole time is money question. And I think because it does feed right into this. And it's
time is money, but also money is time.
Motivating. Yeah, right. Goes back and forth. They're interchangeable.
That's why
but how much? I'm trying to figure out the exact exchange rate between time and money. Give me some time on that one.
This is when I'm going and trying to fundraise at these like summits or whatever full of rich people that I've snuck into. The thing I want to shake them about most, because they talk about like their meditation practices and how centered they are, and they're Zen, and it's like and they attribute their money, their success, to those practices. It's like, no, you dumb shit. You have those time for those practices because you have the money to pursue them. Like you have a maid and a nanny and you have an assistant, and like and you have an accountant, and all of the shit that the regular person spends an extra 15 hours a week just trying to navigate, you don't even have to think about. So you get to be centered. Yeah. So the money equals the time for me.
Yeah. Speaking of which, we are 2 minutes past our time. So you
speaking
guys
of time
owe
and money,
me,
I think it's funny. We just spent 2 hours talking and thinking about money, and everyone watching has spent 2 hours talking and thinking about
we
money.
started
So
late. It's been an
I
hour
guess
and a
we
half.
participated in that 4 hours a day that people are doing on average.
We should be paying
Sorry.
people to listen, really. All right.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.